Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. I am MongoSlade. Today we're going to talk about Jon Moxley and his backhand slaps to the EVPs and Tony Khan. Whether he knows it or not, this is what he's doing. So he's talking to some guy from CBS. I have no idea who this guy is. Doesn't matter. We're going to get into the audio of the question and Moxley's response.
Trying to build something new in AEW, quite interesting. For you, when did you notice that there was something that required changing in AEW? At what point, what sort of motivated you to take this stance?
I spent about 2 months just thinking and reading books and walking around downtown Cincinnati at 3 o'clock in the morning, thinking, as I'm one to do.
Okay, for the record, let's stop this. Moxley looks like a really old Bruce Willis at this point. He looks like an old man. And this is like the camera being very up close to his face and the car, not very flattering. He said he spent 2 months walking around reading books. Well, being normal, I guess.
And had a vision. A vision of a future, a vision that it could be ours, that it could belong to everybody, that a vision of a world where everyone can be successful, a vision of a world where everyone.
Wait a second, is he John Moxley or John Lennon?
Strengths are brought to the forefront, and a vision of a world that is inhospitable for bullshit.
Uh-oh.
And one thing I've found challenging, in the previous iteration of the AEW was I found it challenging to find anyone who would take responsibility for anything. And
okay, let's pause it right here. You say you found it challenging for anyone to take responsibility for anything. Oh my goodness. That is a tidal wave because this guy came in 2019. He was one of the first big free agents that jumped over to AEW. And he says that he found it difficult for anybody to take responsibility for anything. Tony Khan is, of course, the first one to get slapped in the face because he's the boss. He's the guy who is signing the checks. But then this guy had 4 EVPs at one point in time. Sure, 2 years ago, one left. But then CM Punk was made into a consultant. And let CM Punk tell it, he was also trying to take responsibility for some things. But it didn't quite work out. Now, Moxley is here telling us in 2024, nobody was willing to take responsibility for anything. This is very interesting. But it also, it says that the people wanted to be EVPs, but EVPs in name only. Now, we also do know that a lot of their booking power was taken away from them, pretty early when it comes to the EVPs. I think it might have been 2020 or 2021. So they kind of been in name only EVPs for the most part. But it says a lot that all of this stuff was baked into the product of AEW from the beginning. And we were told about this, that these guys they held some kind of power in the company. And now you're telling me that these guys, despite the fact that they were given all this authority, decided they didn't want to be responsible for anything? They wanted the power but not the responsibility? Interesting, but not surprising. That's kind of how the world works.
It's not my fault was the thing that would be heard bouncing around the hallways of AEW quite ubiquitously. And so essentially what it boils down to is, well, I'll just take responsibility for everything. For every single thing. I'll make it my responsibility. You can blame me. If we run out of hot dogs tonight, if the vendor in the concourse runs out of fucking hot dogs in Providence, Rhode Island, I'll make it my responsibility. Blame me. Put the responsibility on me. And like next time, or you know what? I'll go to Costco and get 30 boxes of hot dogs, and I'll drive them to the building. I'll make sure that we have enough for next time. I'll have my wife fucking bake cookies for 3 days straight, and I'll fucking drive them to the building myself. Like whatever I got to do to there's stuff that just it can't not get done. Mm-hmm. It can't not get confronted.
This is amazing. This is amazing. He is indirectly saying pretty much the same thing CM Punk was saying, that the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega are completely incompetent, ineffective leaders, and that Tony Khan doesn't know what he's doing. And this is a guy who is the world champion of the company, saying essentially the same damn thing. That it's him, a talent. I don't know if he has some kind of other kind of contract, but he is a talent, and he is willing to take responsibility for the hot dogs being sold because nobody else is willing to do that. Amazing stuff here. Truly eye-opening, enlightening even.
There's no other. So I'll just do it myself, and I can rely on the person to the right of me, to the person to the left of me, and they can rely on me to do that. And that's my group, that's my circle, that's what we're doing, and that circle will grow. And none of this stuff happens overnight. None of this stuff. It's nothing. You just press a button, and all of a sudden, everything looks entirely different on the surface.
This is brutal. I mean, the amount of time it's taken him to express his thoughts is coming across. The comment section is saying stuff like he sounds impaired. I'm not going to say that because I know his history. If he wasn't already kind of a guy who had already gone on record, I probably would make that joke. But I'm not going to make that joke. I'm just going to say it's the delayed way of speaking is interesting, very interesting. But he said he had a vision, guys. I'm still stuck there. I'm stuck on I had a vision, like he was taking ayahuasca or something.
I mean, the whole thing, as far as companies go, it's only 5-something years old, and so you
totally.
We start out with 2 hours of TV, and that's one thing, and then 3, then 5, and now it's a different thing. Now it's, and if you don't have the infrastructure to support, you fall to the level of your systems, right? So if the branch pops out of the dirt before it's ready, it will not have the structural integrity to hold the fruit that it bears. You see, and I think maybe we've gotten things out of order as far as one of the first things I learned in wrestling, that you don't know how to do anything. You learn how to.
Okay, let's talk about the tree thing. So he said they did things out of order. Sounds to me like, I hate to toot my own horn, but toot. When I said a couple of years ago that AEW was growing too fast. And what I meant by that was they had barely really established themselves on Wednesdays before they added a bunch of other shows. You know, Dark, then Dark Elevation, and then shortly after that, Rampage. The show had only been on the air for 2 or 3 years at that point, and they had already expanded greatly. And they had already agreed to do Battle of the Belts. And all of these things fell apart within weeks of each other. You know, now Rampage and Collision and all these things are unbearable shows. And of course, Dark and Dark Elevation does not even exist anymore. So that's my interpretation of what he's saying here is, you know, AEW started to grow very fast due to fan interest and Tony Khan's investment and Warner Bros. Discovery being, you know, very open to hosting more product. But they didn't have the experience to book multiple shows, you know, across, you know, 3 or 4 nights of television. You know, it became problematic. And they had to scale back. Now, I see that, but they still have the same amount of hours of product right now. They just converted Dark and Dark Elevation into Collision, but they still have the same, you know, hours of product. And then Tony Khan went and bought Ring of Honor. That's another hour of product that he has to produce. But, yeah, I mean, I can see how that could be a bit much, but I still stuck on the idea that he feels like he has to do something about it. When, again, a bunch of other people tried to take responsibility for this show, and people didn't want to hear it.
You know, they didn't even let me in the ring, you know, for like a month or two, you know, to learn how to lock up and do things and all this, you know, before you even get in the ring. The only time you get in the ring is, you know, you learn and you learn how to fall down and do that like 50 times in a row until your head spinning, you want to vomit, and then you do it again and again and again and again until you got that stuff down like it's a reflex and it's perfected and it's there. And then you move on to the next thing. So, but what that is called and how that is described is, you know, and I hear this over and over and over, it's crawl, walk, run. Mm-hmm. Crawl, walk, run. And maybe we try to run a little bit faster. Maybe we went from a certain cadence of walk and tried to jump into a run a little bit, and things got a little out of balance and split the differential, so to speak. So it's about just getting into the right gear for the speed you're attempting to drive, you know, which we're going to do. And
okay, I think I get it. He's meandering a little bit here, but he tried to use the analogy of, you know, learning one thing at a time, mastering one thing at a time, and maybe they started moving a little faster than they should have. Part of that was, you know, guys like Chris Jericho, who was going on, you know, podcasts talking about how they're going to beat Raw in the ratings and all this stuff. You know, they got a little further ahead of themselves. They got a little full of themselves, you know. But there was a certain level of success there to justify some of the things that they were saying. I mean, Tony Khan recently did an interview, was talking about everybody correcting the ticket sales for All In, where from 81,000 to 73, and he was talking about how, you know, that's more than the people that was at the Tyson fight. So, you know, that's phenomenal. I'm like, yeah, it is, but you guys went running around saying that it was the most tickets sold for a wrestling show of all time, and it's not true. It's just not true.
Actually,
so a lot of that stuff, a lot of these critiques and all this stuff was brought on AEW because the fans had got ahead of themselves, the talent had got ahead of themselves, the office got ahead of itself, and it's a humbling period that they're in right now with the empty buildings and the constipated merchandise. It's an interesting time.
Actually, quite excited about it. I been through a lot of last couple of years. Very very strange, rough kind of personal couple of years. But I feel I've gone through a bit of a personal transformation and recently, and things were very clear in my head, and still just kind of slowly over time evolving into the person that I think I'm meant to be. And I don't think I think this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And it was always like this. And right here at this exact time, at this exact place, is exactly where I'm supposed to be, I think. And all right, feel. So I'm very, very optimistic, about everything. And
As am I.
All right. I mean, this guy's not saying anything now. All right. So I'm starting to agree with the comment section of this video. He sounds somewhat sedated. Again, the delayed reactions. I'm used to this kind of stuff. I work in mental health. It sounds like he took something before this interview. I know that he has problems with drugs and alcohol. I don't want to put that on him. It might just be he's thinking his way through. But it's the meandering. It's I'm trying to be nice, but I guess we got all we can get out of this thing. All right, I don't know how much more of this stuff is left, but I think he said everything that he could possibly say. This is what he's supposed to be doing. He had a vision to do this. He saw all of these problems, and he's going to plug these holes, and that's fine. But my question is, he has no experience doing this stuff. It's not just the inmates running the asylum. It's a bunch of people who have no idea what they're doing, trying to run a multi-million-dollar wrestling promotion. Whether it was Tony Khan with zero experience running a wrestling promotion, wrestling and booking the shows, the EVPs, of which there were 4, who had no experience running a wrestling promotion, no experience running a locker room, no experience in leadership, no experience whatsoever at all. They didn't even work under anybody. The closest one was Cody, who spent most of his time with his dad, who of course was a booker. He was the closest one who had any experience to, work, being in a leadership position in a company. None of these people knew what they were doing. CM Punk had some experience because, he used to help run things in Ring of Honor. He had been given a lot of responsibility in OVW, but he was also a bitter man-child. And once given a position of authority, he really very quickly learned that he wasn't all that well equipped to run things either. So now they got him sitting next to Shawn Michaels in NXT so that he could, look like he's in charge. But little brother's controller is probably not even plugged in. And now Jon Moxley's here saying, well, I'll take over. I'll do it. I'll do it all. Like, oh my God. Can you just hire somebody? I don't know. I know there's not a lot of people floating around with wrestling experience. I mean, many of them are so old. They don't. But this is a Dixie Carter situation all over again. How first it was Jeff Jarrett that came in, and Jarrett, who actually put money into the promotion, and he was, wanted to have his creative vision. And then, you had your writing team with your Dutch and your Jim Cornettes and your Bruce Pritchards, and you had guys like Raven in Dixie's ear. And then over time, Hulk Hogan came in. Hulk Hogan had his own vision of what to do, and that seems to be what's happening with TNA. Is there's, in TNA there was no stability. There was constant, everybody, pulling back and forth, and when it comes to Dixie, we should do this. Dixie, we should do that. And she had no idea how to discern between good ideas and bad ideas. So she was just listening to whoever kind of blew the most smoke up her ass. Now it seems that Tony Khan's in the same position. He's a lot more successful than Dixie was, but he's constantly being pulled back and forth. You got Jericho, you got the EVPs, you got Punk, You got Cody. You got now this guy. Now you got Mercedes, who needs to have her own personal writer. Now you got MVP and his racial hang-ups and all this stuff. These guys are digging a hole deeper than necessary because none of them know what they're doing. And I don't think anybody is willing to just accept that they don't know what they're doing. And this was, I guess, bound to happen because nobody had successfully run a wrestling promotion with the amount of stability that Vince had done in WWE. Whether you hate Vince or not, the one positive thing is he was the final answer. He was the final word. No matter who was in his ear, he was the final word. And he was the one that was responsible for everything. Tony Khan should be the guy saying, I'm responsible for everything. All the mistakes, all the success, everything. Because he is. He's the boss. He is the boss. He should be the one making these comments about how he's responsible for everything. He should be take responsibility for giving authority to these guys who don't know what they're doing. Everybody wants to be a locker room leader. Nobody wants to take responsibility for anything. And I want to at least give Moxley some credit because he could have just let the ship sink, But then that just means he has to go back to Stanford if he wants to keep making money in this business, And most other people would have just let it sink. I mean, that's what happened in places like TNA. Most folks just left. They just took off, But AEW actually has people who care about it to a degree, and they're trying to fix it. So I want to give him credit for at least for that. But this imagining a world and a vision where everybody can be successful, I mean, that sounds very utopian. Sounds pretty ridiculous. But he's welcome to try it. And if Tony Khan's willing to let this guy drive the motorboat, I mean, it is what it is. We've already known that Tony Khan is not a professional, that Tony Khan doesn't know what he's doing. But could it be more obvious?